The night the palace burned. The kingdom mourned the death of its crown prince. Bells rang across the capital. Priests prayed for his soul, and the royal family wept before the people. But the truth was something far darker. The prince did not die in the fire. He was betrayed by his own blood. His name was erased from royal records. His portraits destroyed. His existence buried like a terrible secret. But 15 years later, a mysterious warlord began conquering kingdoms across the north. No one knew who he truly was, until the night he stood before the gates of the very kingdom that once called him prince, and whispered one sentence: "Did you really think I died?" In the peaceful kingdom of Alden, the people loved their crown prince. His name was Leon. Leon was known as a kind and honorable man. He often rode through villages without guards and spoke to farmers like old friends. He listened to their problems and helped whenever he could. Because of this, many people believed that when Leon became king, the kingdom would become stronger and happier. But Leon had one weakness. He trusted the people closest to him too much. Inside the palace lived his younger brother, Victor. Since childhood, Victor had lived in Leon's shadow. While Leon received praise from soldiers and love from the people, Victor was often ignored. Slowly, jealousy began to grow in Victor's heart. To everyone else, Victor looked like a loyal brother. He smiled when he stood beside Leon. But behind that smile was something dark. There was also Clara, Leon's fiancée. She had been promised to Leon since they were young. To the world, she looked gentle and devoted. Leon believed she would stand beside him when he became king. But Clara had already made a different choice. A choice Leon did not know about. Even Leon's parents, King Adrian and Queen Mira, were beginning to doubt him. Some nobles in the royal court whispered that Leon was too kind to rule a powerful kingdom. Victor knew how to use those whispers. Little by little, he planted doubt in the king's mind. And Leon never noticed. Because Leon believed his family would always stand with him. On the night of the royal celebration feast, the palace was filled with music and laughter. Nobles and generals gathered to celebrate the future king. Leon raised his cup with a smile. Victor raised his cup back at him. Clara gently held Leon's hand. To everyone watching, it looked like a perfect moment. But in that very hall, the betrayal had already begun. The royal celebration feast lasted long into the night. Music filled the great hall of the palace. Nobles laughed, soldiers raised their cups, and servants carried plates of food across the tables. Prince Leon sat beside his family. He felt proud but calm. Soon he would become king, and he believed he would rule with kindness and fairness. Next to him sat Clara, his fiancée. She held his arm gently. Across the table sat his younger brother, Victor. Victor stood and raised his cup. "To my brother," Victor said loudly. "The future king of Alden." The nobles cheered. Leon smiled and lifted his own cup. "To family," he replied. He drank the wine. At first, nothing felt strange. But a few moments later, a sharp pain spread through his chest. His vision blurred, and the bright lights of the hall began to spin. Leon placed his hand on the table. Something was wrong. "Brother, are you all right?" Victor asked. His voice sounded worried, but his eyes were cold. Leon tried to stand, but his legs became weak. The pain grew stronger. Suddenly he fell to one knee. The hall became silent. Clara quickly moved away from him. "Guards!" Victor shouted. Soldiers rushed into the room. Victor pointed directly at Leon. "My brother has tried to poison the king," he declared. The nobles gasped in shock. Leon lifted his head slowly, confused and weak. "What?" he whispered. But no one listened. King Adrian stood up with anger in his eyes. "Seize him," the king ordered. The guards grabbed Leon before he could even move. Leon looked toward his brother. Victor calmly met his gaze. Then Victor smiled. A cold, quiet smile. In that moment, Leon finally understood. The wine had not been meant for the king. It had been meant for him. The guards dragged Leon through the palace hall. The poison in his body made every step difficult. His vision was still blurry, and his chest burned with pain. Yet the words he had just heard were even more painful. "My brother tried to poison the king." The accusation echoed through his mind. Leon looked around the hall. Nobles whispered to each other. Some looked shocked, others simply watched in silence. But no one defended him, not even Clara. She stood beside Victor, avoiding Leon's eyes. Leon felt his heart sink. "Father, you know I would never do this," Leon said weakly. King Adrian stared at him with anger. "Enough," the king said coldly. Your brother saw everything. Leon turned toward Victor. Victor, tell them the truth. Victor stepped forward slowly. I wish I could, brother, he said calmly. But the truth is exactly what everyone saw. The hall became quiet again. Leon understood. Victor had already planned everything. Take him away, the king ordered. The guards dragged Leon out of the palace and into the cold night. Hours later, they arrived at the edge of a high cliff outside the capital. Below them, the dark sea crashed against the rocks. Leon finally realized what was about to happen. This is madness, he said quietly. The captain of the guards looked away. Prince Victor gave the order, the captain said. Leon closed his eyes for a moment. His own brother had decided his fate. Without another word, the guards pushed him toward the edge. The cold wind rushed past him. For a brief moment, Leon saw the lights of the kingdom he once loved. Then the world disappeared beneath him. The prince fell into the darkness. Back in the palace, the royal court announced the news the next morning. The crown prince had died, and with his death, Prince Victor became the new heir to the throne. The cold sea swallowed Leon as he fell from the cliff. The freezing water shocked his body, and the poison still burned inside him. Waves crashed against the rocks as the storm grew stronger. For a moment, Leon thought this was the end. But fate had other plans. A small boat appeared in the darkness. A strong hand grabbed Leon's arm and pulled him out of the water. When Leon opened his eyes, he saw a familiar face. It was Sir Roland, one of the kingdom's greatest knights. Stay awake, Your Highness, Roland said quickly. Leon tried to speak, but his voice was weak. Why are you here? Roland helped him lie down inside the boat. Because I knew something was wrong, the knight answered. Roland had served Leon since he was a boy. Unlike the others in the palace, he never believed the prince would betray the king. I followed the guards when they took you away, Roland said, and I arrived just in time. After that night, Leon disappeared from the world. The kingdom believed the crown prince had died in the sea. His name slowly faded from the palace halls, and his portraits were quietly removed from the walls. Meanwhile, far from the capital, Leon began a new life. Sir Roland brought him to a distant northern land where no one knew his face. The place was cold and harsh, filled with mercenaries, soldiers, and warriors who survived by strength alone. At first, life there was difficult. Leon had grown up in a palace. Now he slept in small wooden houses and trained every day like a common fighter. But Leon never complained. Every morning before sunrise, he trained with Roland. Sword fighting, archery, strategy, day after day, year after year. The kind prince who once trusted everyone slowly disappeared. In his place, a stronger man began to rise. Leon learned how armies moved, how battles were won, and how leaders inspired their soldiers. The mercenaries who first laughed at the quiet newcomer soon stopped laughing. They saw how fast he learned. They saw how calm he remained in every fight. Most of all, they saw his determination. Years passed. The boy who once wore royal clothes was now a hardened warrior. His body carried scars from training and battle, and his eyes held a quiet strength that few men possessed. In the northern lands, rumors began to spread. People spoke of a mysterious commander who never lost a battle. A leader who protected his soldiers and punished corruption. Many warriors started following him. They did not know his real name, but they respected the name he had chosen. Leon the Black Commander. Sir Roland watched his former prince carefully. You've become stronger than any king I've ever served, Roland said one night beside a campfire. Leon looked toward the distant south, toward the kingdom that had betrayed him. The time will come, Leon said quietly, when we return. Years passed in the kingdom of Alden. When Prince Victor finally became king, many people hoped he would lead the kingdom well. But those hopes slowly faded. Victor ruled with pride and suspicion. He trusted very few people and listened mostly to greedy nobles who cared only about power and wealth. Taxes grew heavier each year, and the poor villages began to suffer. Farmers struggled to feed their families. Soldiers were paid late. Even the once proud royal army began to weaken. Inside the palace, things were not peaceful either. King Adrian had grown older and quieter. Sometimes he walked through the royal halls and stopped in front of empty walls where paintings once hung. Those paintings had shown the face of his first son, the crown prince who had betrayed him. Queen Mira also seemed restless. Late at night, she often sat alone in the royal garden, staring at the stars. Deep in her heart, doubt had begun to grow. Had they judged Leon too quickly? But neither of them dared to speak openly about the past. Meanwhile, Clara, now Queen of Alden, lived beside Victor on the throne. To the public she appeared proud and powerful. But the people noticed something strange. She rarely smiled. Beyond the kingdom's borders, troubling news arrived from the north. Small kingdoms and warlords were being defeated one by a mysterious army. Cities surrendered quickly, and soldiers who faced this force spoke of a commander who never lost a battle. No one knew his true identity. They only knew the name whispered by soldiers who had seen him. The Black Commander. The stories said he was calm in battle, fearless in danger, and loyal to the people under his protection. When King Victor first heard these rumors, he simply laughed. "No northern mercenary will threaten Alden," he said proudly. But the generals of the kingdom were not so confident. Because the mysterious army was slowly moving south, closer and closer, toward the kingdom that once believed he's dead. The rumors about the Black Commander continued to spread across the lands. Every kingdom in the north had already fallen under his control. But strangely, the people in those lands did not complain. In fact, many said their lives had improved. The new commander punished corrupt nobles and protected the poor villages. Because of this, many soldiers chose to follow him willingly. Soon, the army of the Black Commander became stronger than anyone expected. Far away in a northern camp, Leon stood on a hill and looked toward the south, toward the kingdom he once called home. The cold wind moved through his dark cloak as thousands of soldiers prepared their camps below. Sir Roland walked beside him. "The army is ready," Roland said quietly. Leon did not answer immediately. For many years he had waited for this moment. The kingdom believed the crown prince had died. But the man standing here was no longer the gentle prince they once knew. He had become a leader, a warrior, and a man who had seen the true nature of power. Finally, Leon spoke. "How far are we from Alden?" he asked. 2 weeks if we march quickly," Roland replied. Leon nodded slowly. Across the firelit camps, soldiers sharpened their swords and prepared their armor. They trusted the Black Commander completely. But very few of them knew his true identity. Roland looked at Leon carefully. "Once we cross the border, everything will change," the knight said. Leon's eyes remained fixed on the distant horizon. "It already has," he replied calmly. After a long silence, Roland asked the question that had waited for years. "When the kingdom sees you again, what will you do?" Leon finally turned. His voice was steady. "I will take back what was stolen." The next morning, thousands of soldiers began to march south. And for the first time in many years, Prince Leon was returning home. The army of the Black Commander moved steadily toward the south. Thousands of soldiers marched across plains and forests. Their banners waved in the wind, and their armor shone under the rising sun. Wherever the army passed, villages watched with curiosity and fear. But something unexpected happened. The army did not steal food. They did not harm the villagers. Instead, Leon ordered his soldiers to pay for supplies and protect the people. Because of this, many villagers began to whisper that the mysterious commander was different from other warlords. News of the army soon reached the kingdom of Alden. Inside the royal palace, King Victor listened as his generals reported the situation. "The northern army is approaching our borders," one general said nervously. Victor leaned back in his throne. "Just another mercenary force," he said with a careless laugh. "Our kingdom has defeated many enemies before." But the generals looked uneasy. "This army has never lost a battle," another general replied. Victor's smile slowly faded. Meanwhile, in the royal garden, Queen Mira walked beside King Adrian. They had also heard the rumors. "Do you remember Leon?" Mira suddenly asked. Adrian stopped walking. For years they had avoided speaking that name. "Why mention the past now?" Adrian said quietly. Mira looked toward the distant mountains. "I don't know why, but something feels different," she replied. Back at the Northern Army camp, Leon studied a large map spread across a wooden table. Sir Roland stood beside him. "Our scouts report that Alden's army is already preparing to defend the capital," Roland said. Leon looked calm. "The people of Alden are not our enemy," he answered. "Only those who betrayed the kingdom." Roland nodded. For the first time in many years, Leon's army finally crossed the southern border. The kingdom that had once thrown its prince into the sea was now within reach. And this time, Leon was not coming as a prince, but as a conqueror. The army of the Black Commander moved deeper into the lands of Alden. Town after town opened their gates without a fight. The soldiers expected fear, but instead many villagers watched with curiosity. Some even greeted them. Leon noticed this immediately. "These people are not loyal to Victor," he said quietly to Sir Roland. Roland nodded. "Many of them have suffered under his rule," he replied. Heavy taxes and corrupt nobles had made life difficult for the people of Alden. For years they had quietly endured their pain. Now a powerful army had arrived. And strangely, that army treated them with respect. As Leon's soldiers passed through one village, an old man stepped forward and looked closely at the Black Commander. His eyes widened. "You look familiar," the old man whispered. Leon said nothing and continued walking. But the whisper had already begun. In another town, a former palace soldier saw Leon from a distance. He stared in disbelief. "That face," the man murmured. Within days, rumors spread across the kingdom. Some people began saying something impossible. The mysterious Black Commander looked exactly like the crown prince who had died years ago. Back in the capital, King Victor slammed his hand on the throne. "Lies," he shouted when the rumors reached him. But the royal court was uneasy. Even some generals had noticed the resemblance. Meanwhile, King Adrian listened quietly as the news was reported. His heart suddenly felt heavy. For years he had tried to forget that night. But now a terrible thought began to grow in his mind. What if the prince he condemned had never died? Late that evening, Queen Mira approached him. "Have you heard the rumors?" she asked softly. Adrian nodded slowly. The king looked toward the dark window. For the first time in many years, he whispered his son's name. "Leon." The army of the Black Commander finally reached the capital of Alden. Thousands of soldiers surrounded the great city walls. The people inside watched from their homes and towers, whispering among themselves. Some were afraid, but many were simply waiting. Inside the palace, King Victor stood before his generals. "We will crush them," he said angrily. "Prepare the army." But his voice no longer carried the confidence it once had. Outside the city gates, Leon rode forward with a small group of soldiers. His black armor reflected the morning light as he stopped before the massive gates of the capital, the same gates he had once passed through as the crown prince. Sir Roland rode beside him. "Are you ready?" Roland asked quietly. Leon looked at the walls of the kingdom he once loved. "I have been ready for years," he answered. Soon the gates slowly opened. Victor had decided to meet the mysterious commander himself. Two groups approached each other in the open field outside the city. Victor stepped forward first. Then he froze. For a moment, the world seemed to stop, because the man standing before him was unmistakable. The face, the eyes, the calm expression. Victor's voice shook slightly. "Leon." The soldiers around them began whispering in shock. Leon looked at his brother without emotion. "Yes," he said calmly. Victor stared in disbelief. "You died." Leon shook his head slowly. "No," he replied. "You tried to kill me." Silence filled the field. Even Victor's own generals looked uneasy. Leon's voice remained steady. "You stole my crown," he continued. "You betrayed your own blood." Victor clenched his fists. Then Leon took one step forward. "But today," he said quietly, "the truth returns to Alden." The field outside the capital had become completely silent. Thousands of soldiers watched as the two brothers faced each other. Victor still looked shocked. "You are lying," he said angrily. "The crown prince died years ago." But many soldiers in the royal army were already whispering. They remembered the face of the young prince who once rode through their villages. And the man standing before them looked exactly the same. Leon spoke calmly. "You poisoned me during the royal feast," he said. "You told the king I tried to kill him." Victor's face darkened. "You have no proof," he replied quickly. Leon turned slightly and raised his hand. Sir Roland rode forward. The old knight removed his helmet so everyone could see his face. Many soldiers gasped. Roland had once been one of the most respected knights of Alden. "I was there that night," Roland said loudly. "I saw everything." The whispers among the soldiers grew louder. Inside the city walls, the people had gathered to watch. King Adrian and Queen Mira were also standing on the palace balcony. When Adrian saw Roland, his face turned pale. For years he had believed the story Victor told him. But now doubt filled his heart. Leon spoke again. "Victor betrayed his own brother," he said. "He betrayed this kingdom." Victor looked around desperately. His generals were silent. Even his soldiers seemed uncertain. For the first time since he became king, Victor realized something terrible. The people no longer trusted him. Leon stepped forward once more. His voice was calm but powerful. This war was never against the people of Alden, he said. It was against the man who stole their future. The royal army slowly began lowering their weapons. One by one, soldiers stepped away from Victor. The truth had finally arrived, and the kingdom had made its choice. The soldiers of Alden slowly stepped away from Victor. One by one, swords lowered and shields dropped to the ground. The royal army had made its decision. They would no longer fight for a king who had betrayed his own brother. Victor looked around in disbelief. "You are all traitors," he shouted. But no one answered him. Across the field, Leon stood calmly beside Sir Roland. Years ago, he had been thrown from a cliff as a helpless prince. Now he stood before the kingdom as the strongest leader in the land. Victor suddenly pulled out his sword and charged forward in anger. "If I cannot rule this kingdom," he shouted, "no one will." But the fight ended quickly. Leon moved with the calm skill he had gained through years of training. Within seconds, Victor's sword was knocked from his hand. Victor fell to his knees in the dust. For the first time, fear appeared on his face. Behind the city walls, King Adrian and Queen Mira watched in silence. Tears filled the queen's eyes as she finally understood the terrible mistake they had made. "Leon," she whispered. Victor looked up at his brother. "Please spare me," he said weakly. But Leon's expression did not change. "Blood does not erase betrayal," Leon replied calmly. Justice had to be served. Victor was taken away by the soldiers. Later that day, the gates of Alden opened and the people filled the streets. They welcomed Leon not as a conqueror, but as their true king. When the crown was brought before him, Leon held it quietly for a moment. He did not smile. "I do not take this crown for power," he said to the people. "I take it to protect the kingdom." The people cheered as the crown was placed on his head. The prince who had been betrayed had returned. And this time, he ruled not for himself. He ruled for the people of Alden. The kingdom was finally at peace. Leon did not rule for power or glory. He ruled for the people who believed in him. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. But from those betrayals, a stronger future can be built. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Midnight Story Lounge for more epic stories.